Good Wednesday afternoon to you. Welcome to the Jon Sanchez Show on News Talk 780 KOH. It's a pleasure to be with you on this big rally day. Oh, what a day it was. Matter of fact, biggest day gain going back to April of last year for the S&P 500. Dow was strong. NASDAQ was strong. Oil prices tumbling. Bond yields coming down. On the surface, it looked like the most perfect day in the world, right? Everything that we wanted. You know, it was right here on this show yesterday that the news broke that the president decided to postpone the attack that was supposed to occur at 5 p.m. last night. Told the world we're going to go on a 45-day hiatus from anything going on. No more bombings, no more nothing. A ceasefire. And I said last night, if you caught my tone, and if you would have seen me, which you could have if you tune into YouTube, I kind of had one eyebrow up and one eyebrow down when that news broke. I'll be honest, I was very skeptical. And I'm even more skeptical today. And I want to just kind of lay the table perfectly for you. Those of you that have followed me for 20 plus years that I've been on this radio station know that I'm one of the most optimistic persons out there. But after you do this for a while, you kind of start to get a little jaded on headlines, because headlines move markets on a short-term basis. News, solidified deals, that's what moves markets on a permanent basis. And I've been saying for weeks upon weeks that I just don't see an easy way out of this war, and therefore an easy way out of this stock market to stop the volatility. But today the market's rallied on the news. So what's my problem? My problem is this: our demands and their demands are light years apart. And when I made up today's show tease, ceasefire or a setup, why the Iran deal may not hold, at about 9 o'clock, actually about 9:30 this morning is when I made up the show tease and the show topic. I had no idea that just 1 hour ago, Iran came out and said the United States has already violated the ceasefire agreement. They've done two things. This is from the Iranian parliamentary speaker. So it's already started. But again, not long after I made up my show tease this morning, here came the news indicating that Iran already shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Now remember, this was the critical portion of the 45-day ceasefire that we required. Open up the Strait of Hormuz, get the traffic going, oil prices will come down, everybody will be happy, we'll deal with all the other things later. Well, not more than a couple hours after the stock market started trading, news came out, Iran already shut down the Strait of Hormuz. At that point, only 2 ships had gone through, and then they shut it down. So then I start thinking to myself, well, wait a minute here. This is going to be something that'll bring the market down, right? This is bad news. This is already, again, breaking the 45-day ceasefire. But then I thought, we need to dig deeper into what we want and what Iran wants. Because as you heard the president yesterday indicate, the only way this 45-day ceasefire is going to work is if the Strait of Hormuz is opened. But again, when the news came out today that the Strait of Hormuz got closed already, you would have thought the market would have pulled back on that news. But it didn't. Matter of fact, it dipped just a little bit. But by the time the closing bell rang, it moved right back up. We're up about 1,065 or so when that news came out, finished up 1,325 on the Dow. So why is the market not paying attention to this? Because it's trading off of headlines. This is what I want to caution everybody about. The algorithms are driving this market as they have for many, many years. But even, as time goes on, they drive it even more. And you see, algorithms have no feelings. They have no common sense. They're programmed to say, if this happens, i.e., a ceasefire agreement or any positive news, rally the market. If bad news happens, right now there seem to be, okay, well, we'll kind of push it aside. And to me, that seems to be a very dangerous environment. So what am I going to discuss with you? Well, I'm going to go through, again, the big moves of today's market. Again, love it. Absolutely love it. Strong day. But my job is not to sit here and be a cheerleader for you and say, oh, folks, everything is okay. We're going to go sing Kumbaya with Iran, and Israel's going to join in, and we're going to hold hands, and we're going to dance around a campfire and say everything is just fine, as the press is trying to make it out to be. Where common sense is going to prevail, in my opinion, is the following. What are the 10 items that Iran said they must have in order for the ceasefire to hold? What are the 15 that they just released this morning, by the way? What are the 15 items that the U.S. demanded back on my birthday on March 20? Well, I've got those lists. And you're going to find as I share those with you that there's got to be some very, very serious, I won't even say negotiations, but how about eliminations of either the 10-point list from Iran, the 15-point list from the U.S. for this 45-day ceasefire to hold? Because, again, you're going to be as shocked as I am. They're not realistic on either side. Now, you may say, okay, well, the art of the deal, right? Made famous by the president back in the 80s. The art of the deal. We all read the book. You ask for everything, and then you come into the middle, come into the agreement, right? But you start at the top. Well, as I'll share this with you, when I looked over this list of the 10 and the 15 points, I'm thinking, yeah, both sides are really asking for the world, which again, part of negotiations. But where's that going to lead things to? When Jared Kushner and a few other people go to Pakistan this weekend, as it was announced today, to try to negotiate. Because remember, Pakistan's in the middle of this whole thing. Are they just going to rip up the list, the wants, and start over? You see, that's been one of my biggest concerns of this conflict. And I've said this so many times, and I mean it even more now. You may be thinking, well, wait a minute. Why are you saying it now after a big run-up like we had? Because I'll get right to the chase. I don't believe we are out of the woods yet. Again, I'm an optimistic person, as all of you know. But I don't believe this thing is going to come to an end. I don't believe, personally, I'll make it even worse. I don't think this 45-day ceasefire is going to hold. Now, it already got broken, as I'll go through. I want to share with you what the Iranian parliamentary speaker said just an hour ago. But also, let me throw this into there, because I know many of you were so hard at work today and you didn't get a chance to follow the news. So last night, Israel continued to bomb Iran. They continued to bomb various parts of Iran where Hezbollah was. There was no ceasefire. Iran said, wait a minute here. This area where Hezbollah is located, that's not part of the deal. Iran said, well, wait a minute. Yes, it is. You're not supposed to do any bombing against us, no matter where it is, no matter what groups are there. Israel said, nope, sorry, not part of the deal. So there was the first confusion this morning. Conversely, overnight, and again, this all came after this 45-day ceasefire agreement was announced last night that Iran, quote, quote, supposedly agreed to. Iran last night sends drones and rockets and everything else, once again, to Kuwait, to many other parts, the UAE, etc. They continue just like normal. So where's all the excitement? Well, how would this generate a 1,300-point gain in the market? Because of optimism. You see, the algorithms and the human traders that are behind it, which again, they don't really move the market anymore, it's the algorithms, are going off the headline. 45-day ceasefire. I'm telling you, let's bring in some human, thinking into this, some human common sense. And let's be cautious because, again, I don't think this thing is going to hold. I really don't. And I hate to be pessimistic, but once again, you're always going to get the truth for how I feel about things. So when we come back from the break, I'm going to start things off. I'll recap what happened today, hit the major averages and commodities, etc. And then I want to go straight to the story from the Iranian parliamentary speaker who said just an hour ago, look at two things have already been violated. And you know as well as I do, by them coming out and saying that, that's going to give them a get out of jail free card to continue bombings and missile strikes and so on and so forth tonight, or at least our nighttime. Because they're going to come back and say, hey, U.S., you already violated two of the agreements that we wanted, two of the wants. So therefore, we can justify continuing this. That on top of them, again, shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. It's a mess, folks. And again, I wish I could be so giddy and excited as I used to be when I was younger, when I would see a big, massive day like this and say, oh, things are great. But when you get a little bit older and you get a little bit wiser and you get a few gray hairs in your head, you got to go, all right, let's use some common sense. Let's go back and have a little experience on this. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on with you. Is it a ceasefire or is it a setup to more turmoil to come? Let's turn it over to Kristen Snow. She's in the Right Now Traffic Center. Hello, Kristen. Welcome back to the Jon Sanchez Show on News Talk 780 KOH. All right. Here's the wonderful news of the day. 1,325-point gain on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Pretty amazing, right? 1,325 points. That equates to a 2.85% rise, closing at 47,909. NASDAQ gained 617 points, 2.8%, closing at 22,634. S&P 500 up 166 points, 2.51%, closing at 6,782. Is this a ceasefire that can last, or is this just a setup for more turmoil ahead? That's my theme for today. Later in the program, when we come back from the bottom of the hour break, I'm going to delve deep into what's holding this whole thing together, at least supposedly. Our 15-point plan, Iran's 10-point plan that they just released this morning. All right, let's hit the oil side of things. Oil tumbling today, $18.45 loss, $94.40 a barrel. Gold rose $90.70, closing at $4,770 an ounce. And here's the other point I want to mention. You've heard me say thousands of times on this show, the bond market is the driver of the bus. The stock market is the passenger. Wouldn't you think today, where we rally almost 3% on the Dow, almost 3% on the NASDAQ, 2.5% on the S&P, that bond yields would plummet? You see, the bond market's feeling the way that I am. They don't believe this deal. We only lost 5 basis points today on the 10-year Treasury. Closes 4.29%. Bond market, very skeptical of this situation. Very skeptical. Okay, so let's get down to the meat of today's show. You're now up to date. I'm sure many of you have already seen what happened in the market. But let's bring you up to date on the events. And then, like I said, when we come back from the bottom of the hour break, we'll get into and let you make the decision. How can we come together in this deal? How can we come together when we have 15 points we want? They have 10. Yep, there's negotiations. But I just don't see it happening. And again, I'm going to share with you here right now what the Iranian parliamentary speaker said just about an hour ago before the show started. Now, before I do that, let's go back to yesterday. Again, around this time when the president announced 45-day ceasefire. His main criteria was that the Strait of Hormuz was to open, quote, and this is a quote, without limitation, including tolls. Without limitation, including tolls. Well, wait a minute, tolls? I found a news story that didn't make any of the major headlines. It was a quote from the president, and I don't know how long ago it was. I think it was within the last week. There's no date on there. That he actually talked to the press about going into partnership with Iran to charge tolls of the ships. I mean, I'm talking millions of dollars for a ship to safely make it through the Strait of Hormuz. So that's where that comment comes in. Without limitation, including tolls. Once again, if you just joined us, everything was fine. The strait was open. Early this morning, I'm talking our time, Iran comes out and says, nope, we're not going to open the strait anymore. We're closing it right now. A couple ships got through. And so now you go, well, wait a minute. This was Trump's main criteria for the 45-day ceasefire. Open the strait without limitations, including tolls. But we don't have that. So there's violation number one. All right, so let's get to the story that, again, could affect us tomorrow. So according to the Iranian parliamentary speaker, he says the U.S. has violated the ceasefire agreement already. He's accused the U.S. of violating the 2-week ceasefire, 3 points. Now, he did not go on to say what the 3 points were, but he did say the following quote. He said, the deep historical distrust we hold toward the United States stems from its repeated violations of all forms of commitments, a pattern that has regrettably been repeated once again. 3 parts of Iran's 10-point ceasefire, and again, I'm going to read you when we come back, we'll discuss the 10-point plan. 3 parts of Iran's 10-point ceasefire plan proposal have been violated, he said. The violations are Israel's continued attacks on Lebanon, the entry of a drone into Iranian airspace, and the denial of the Islamic Republic's right to enrich uranium. Now, where I'm confused on this last one, the enrichment of uranium, this was, again, on the 10-point plan. But how that was violated already, I don't know. But I'll tell you, again, from what was made available this morning, there was nothing in there saying you couldn't move a drone into Iranian airspace. So not sure on that one. Israel's continued attack on Lebanon. Yeah, but again, as I told you at the beginning of the show, Israel has said, no, Lebanon's off limit. That's not part of the deal. Iran says, oh yeah, no, that's part of it. No one's supposed to be hurting anybody in Israel. No more bombings, no more nothing. Yeah, right. Quote, in such situation, a bilateral ceasefire or negotiation is unreasonable, the parliamentary speaker said. Let me read that again. In such situation, a bilateral ceasefire or negotiations is unreasonable. White House had no comment. Again, his statements come just a day, less than a day, after the president announced this ceasefire. Over to the Strait of Hormuz, Iran state news agency Fars said earlier today that oil tanker traffic through the strait has been halted as Israel continues to attack Lebanon. The amount of tanker traffic through the strait has plunged during the war, of course. As I said, news reports had it this morning that 2 ships got through. That was it before they shut it back down again. So here we find ourselves in a situation where we don't know who to believe. We don't know, again, how this whole situation is going to unfold over the next 45 days. But as I've said over and over again, I just, in my mind, being on this earth for 62 years and watching these situations unfold, I just don't see how, after such devastation and destruction was done in Iran, that all of a sudden the U.S. can say, all right, 45-day reprieval. I just don't see it. And what you're going to learn when I share with you Iran's 10-point plan, they want the United States of America to pay them to rebuild the country. That's right. Believe it or not. That's what I mean. That's why what they are asking for is so unreasonable. And you have to, like I said before, you have to kind of sit back and go, okay, negotiations, you ask for the world, and then you settle for something in between. But honestly, and again, I'll let you be the judge. This is just my opinion. When I share with you these 10 points, I don't see one of them that are realistic. So do they scratch, when negotiations begin, do they scratch this entire 10-point plan and go, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. I know we asked for these 10 things. We know they're unrealistic, but here's really what we want. Who knows? But can this market continue this rally based upon all of these unknowns? And again, according to Iran, 3 violations of the ceasefire agreement less than 24 hours after it was announced. And really no comments coming out of the White House today. Very, very quiet on this whole issue. That part has me nervous also. All right, be prepared. 10-point plan, 15-point plan, I'll lay it out as we discuss ceasefire or setup. Why the Iranian deal may not hold, in my opinion. Let's turn it over to Jack Saban. He's got news, traffic, and weather. Hello, Jack. Welcome back to the Jon Sanchez Show on News Talk 780 KOH. All right, let's get down to the meat of today's show, the meat and potatoes, as we call it. The 10-point plan offered by Iran today to continue the 45-day ceasefire and maybe end the war. The U.S.'s 15-point plan, which again was given back on March the 24th. But in the meantime, here's how we finished. If you just joined us, a 1,325-point gain on the Dow, 2.85% today. NASDAQ up 617, 2.8%. S&P gaining 166 points, 2.51%. Oil plunging $18.45 to $94.40. As I was just telling my producer during the break, you have the market starting to sell off a little bit here. And I just mean that tongue-in-cheek, just down a bit. Down 42 right now on the Dow futures. NASDAQs are lower by 47. The S&P is giving up 10. But more importantly, guess what's starting to move up? Oil prices. Boy, they're moving fast now. Now a $2.70 gain to $97.11 a barrel. So timing of my show today is absolutely perfect. Ceasefire or setup. I don't think the ceasefire is going to hold. That's the gist of this. Okay, let's get down to this plan. Okay, as I shared with you the prior segment, the president was very adamant in this 45-day plan that the only way, 45-day ceasefire, the only way it's going to hold is if the Strait of Hormuz is open unconditionally, no tolls, no nothing. If you just joined us once again, that happened overnight after the announcement of the 45-day ceasefire. But early this morning, Iran said, nope, it's closed again. We're not letting anybody through. A couple ships made it through. That was it. So now it's already done, right? No more opening. Surprised the president didn't come out today and say, whoa, wait a minute here. That wasn't part of the deal, right? We said this 45 days is it's hinging upon the strait being open, but we haven't heard anything today. What we did hear from the White House today was the 10-point plan that Iran proposed to them. Came out this morning in a social media post. They didn't even give it to the U.S., supposedly. Again, the U.S. picked it up on a social media post. So let's get down to this and review it. Now, I will tell you, the president did say today that these 10 points are a workable basis on which to negotiate. Our News, N-O-U-R, Our News, which is an Iranian publication backed by the Iranian Supreme National Council, published this list. Again, came out this morning. Here we go. So as I read these to you, think to yourself from a common sense, logical situation, do you really think that the U.S. is going to do any of these 10? Not just 1 or 2, but any of these 10. And then when I get done, I'll come back with our 15. Here we go. Number 1, Iranians list. The U.S. must fundamentally commit to guaranteeing non-aggression. So what does that mean in English? No fighting. We know that's not going to happen. Number 2, continuation of Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz. Now, I want to stop right there for a second. Many strategists, war strategists, as well as oil traders, et cetera, are saying, you know what? This thing has really worked out in the favor of Iran in regards to oil prices because they are now really controlling the Strait of Hormuz and they got the world by the you know what's. And they're controlling everything. And that's why they said continuation of Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz. Well, that right there, again, that's not what the president said. This, as far as this 45-day ceasefire. Okay, so 0 out of 2 we're batting. Let's go to number 3. You're going to love this one. Ready? Acceptance of Iran's control. Acceptance that Iran can enrich uranium for its nuclear program. Isn't this, quote, the reason that we're started this whole war? So Iran couldn't have a nuke? And now Iran says, we want the U.S. to accept that we can enrich uranium for our nuclear program. Now, I'll stop right there. President came out today and said, hey, guess what? We're trying to negotiate this uranium situation with Iran, and we've offered to send our people over there to help them dig all this up because, a lot of this is dug way down deep into the earth. And so the president offered that we would send our people over to help the Iranian people dig this out of the ground. I can't make this stuff up. Okay, here's the 4th point on Iran's 10-point plan. Removal of all primary sanctions on Iran. Removal of all primary sanctions on Iran. Remember, there's assets that are frozen. There's all kinds of things. The president did come out today and say any country in the world that is selling arms to Iran will immediately face a 50% tariff. So, point number 5. Removal of all secondary sanctions against foreign entities that do business with Iranian institutions. Removal of all secondary sanctions against foreign entities. So that's the reason that the president said what he did. Number 6, end of all United Security Council resolutions targeting Iran. Number 7, end of all International Atomic Energy Agency resolutions on Iran's nuclear program. So basically, they want to be able to continue doing everything they were doing before as far as the nuclear weapons are concerned. They don't want anybody muddling in on this. Here's the one that really makes me laugh. Compensation payment to Iran for a war damage. So they want us to turn around and write a check for God knows what that dollar amount would be. Number 9. Oh, this is another really good one. Withdraw of U.S. combat forces from the region. Okay, so we're supposed to just pack up and head out of there. And then lastly, number 10, ceasefire on all fronts, including Israel's conflict with Hezbollah and Lebanon. This is what I was saying earlier. Last night, again, right after the ceasefire was announced, Israel attacked Lebanon because Hezbollah is there. So now Iran says, nope, we don't want that. And that's where this disagreement came in overnight, where Israel said, nope, that wasn't in the agreement or part of the ceasefire. So therefore, we're going to continue to attack you in Lebanon. So think about that for a second. How can you have a ceasefire in certain parts of the country, but not a ceasefire in other parts of the country? So that makes absolutely no sense. So now that you know the 10 points, do you see even one that is realistic? I don't. So how can this 45-day ceasefire hold up? Now, this is almost old news, but I thought you would enjoy it because, again, this is about what we want out of the deal. And you're going to find that it's quite opposite in many factors of what Iran has agreed to or wants this morning. So here we go. This was again released. This is what we told Iran we wanted on our 15-point plan on March 24th. First one, nuclear program dismantling. Shut down nuclear facilities in Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordow. Okay, so shut down nuclear. But Iran wants to enrich their uranium. Number 2, end enrichment. Immediate ban on all uranium enrichments on Iranian soil. No, Iran said no, they want to do that. Number 3, stockpile handover. Hand over all highly enriched uranium to the international, so that's the nuclear organization. Number 4, Permanent non-nuclear commitment. Iran must pledge never to seek or develop nuclear weapons. Number 5, IAEA access. Complete and unrestricted IAEA monitoring of all nuclear sites. It's opposite of what Iran said they would do. Number 7, in missile development. Strict limits on the quantity and range of Iran's ballistic missiles. Next one, proxy support halt. Cease funding of and arming of regional allies such as Hezbollah and Hamas. Next, regional de-escalation. Stop attacks on energy facilities and regional neighbors. Next point, Strait of Hormuz. Guarantee the safe and open passage of ships in the waterway. Our next demand, sanction relief. The U.S. may support the lifting of international sanctions. Next, unfreezing assets. The return of frozen Iranian assets as part of a final deal. Diplomatic and economic incentives. Potential U.S. support for civilian energy projects. Bush-Harrier plant is what they're calling that. The next one, long-term stability. Binding UN Security Council resolutions to cement the agreement. Next point, now remember, this was issued on March 24th that we gave them. Ceasefire, a 1-month initial ceasefire to initiate negotiations. And the 15th point, withdrawal of threats, termination of U.S. military strikes against Iran. So it's almost like now that you've heard both sides, it's very similar. Now you see why Iran issued their 10-point rebuttal this morning. They almost went line by line. Obviously, they had 10 points. We gave them 15, but they almost went line by line and said, you're saying you want this? No, we want just the opposite. Nope, you're saying you want this point? No, we want just the opposite. So how do you negotiate over these next 45 days with that being so far behind? That's the real question we must ask ourselves. All right, we'll come back and wrap things up. Let's turn it over to Kristen Snow right now, Traffic Center. Kristen. Come back to the Jon Sanchez Show on News Talk 780 KOH. All right, you've now heard the difference, right? We're miles apart, what Iran wants, what the U.S. wants. We've got a 45-day ceasefire, but yet missiles are still firing. Trump administration today said, we think there was just this major understanding that, Lebanon was part of this negotiation, 45-day ceasefire. Israel says, no, we wanted that. It shouldn't be. And again, Israel bombed them last night. We'll see what happens tonight. So where do we go with all this? Now that we know both sides, we also know one thing. You and I know a fraction of what really is going on behind the scenes. I'll tell you something that did make me feel good. I was perusing the Wall Street Journal's website during this last break. Lo and behold, right on the front page, it's everything I just went over with you, comparing the 10-point plan to the 15-point plan. I was like, geez, why didn't you guys have that up this morning? That would save me a lot of work. But anyways, where do we go with all this? What do you need to be doing right now, right? Because this thing, meaning the market's changing day by day, hour by hour. I'm going to stick with my same advice for you, even though we have a 45-day ceasefire. I hope that you now kind of look at it. And I know many of you are as skeptical about Iran as I am. So this is you're probably going to laugh when I say this, but for those of you that are more maybe younger and not quite so worldly experienced, you may be getting real jittery or giddy and saying, oh, you know what? I'm going to dump all my money back into the market if I, pulled out a little while ago when this whole thing began. Take your time. That's my best advice. Take your time. Let's see if this thing has any legs to stand on. Usually, again, after we get a situation such as we did yesterday, where the news comes out, the algorithms go crazy. Again, big move in the market today, big fall in oil prices, even though they're now moving up $2.40 this after hours trading. One day doesn't really, obviously, the beginning of a trend. I always tell everyone this, no matter what the situation, it doesn't have to be this war situation. Give it a day or two. Let's see what happens. But here's my best advice for you, besides being diversified and all the things I normally say. Watch the bond market. The bond market is always the cooler head versus the equity market. What you want to look for in the bond market is, do we see a big drawdown or big decline, I should say, in bond yields, right? That means that the institutions are coming in and they're piling into the bonds. That says they're nervous. Okay, so again, today, bond prices were down, or bond yields were down 5 basis points. So they were still buying the bonds. Would they really be buying the bonds if they were that convinced that this thing has legs to stand on? So that part worries me. So if you start to see bond yields rise, that will be one of your best indications that the bond market at least thinks that the ceasefire is going to hold. But if we continue to see these bond yields come down as we did today, that's your sign that the bond market is not convinced. And remember, folks, the bond market is significantly larger than the stock market. from a market capitalization standpoint. So it is an excellent indicator. So once again, watch the bond yields. If they go up, that means the bond market's convinced this thing can sustain the 45 days. If the bond yields go down, like they did today, that means bond traders are very nervous that they don't think this thing has legs to stand on. That will start to set the pace. Obviously, watch oil prices. I don't like seeing oil now up $2.41 after the big sell-off today. That should have still continued to sell off. Why is it moving up? Because I think the oil traders, at least at this point, are saying the same thing as I am. This thing doesn't have the legs to stand on. The third factor, let's see what happens this weekend. Again, J.D. Vance and Kushner and a few other boys are heading over to Pakistan to meet with Turkey and all the different delegates and try to solidify this thing. So still got a couple days to go till that happens. But in the meantime, be cautious, be diversified, pay attention, and don't miss one of the shows because I'll keep you up to date the best that I can. God bless you. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow on the Jon Sanchez Show.